Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. And today we are going to be looking at the 2024 presidential election. And this is a scenario that I'm thinking about for a bit, but I'm finally going to do it. It's in my opinion, each party's best candidates for 2024. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, the safe states for Democrat Sherrod Brown, who, for those of you who don't know, Sherrod Brown is the Democratic senator from Ohio. Ron DeSantis is, of course, the governor of Florida. So, the safe states for Brown, I think he'd win New Mexico safe, and I think he'd win Colorado upwards of 15, possibly by 20. But I think New Mexico would be maybe Brown plus 14 or 15 because he doesn't really. The reason that Biden didn't win New Mexico by a safe margin was because A, he did pretty poorly with Hispanics for a Democrat, and B, he didn't. He did terrible, honestly, with oil workers in the South. Brown would do better with Hispanics, and he has support from oil workers, as we saw in his 2018 re-election bid. So I think he could win New Mexico by 14 or 15. Hawaii, safe Democrat. Virginia, Brown would do pretty well. He's not the best for suburbs. Like, he's pretty good with suburbs, but he's not the best. But you know, he'd still do incredibly well with rurals for a Democrat. Like, in the rural parts of Virginia that are down here, towards, I guess, the Southwest, he'd do like 10, 20 points better in some of those counties than Biden did. And he could just do better, possibly flip Virginia Beach with these Trumpian voters. He'd win Maine safe, I think, to be honest. Actually, no, he wouldn't win Maine safe. Maine's not that elastic. It's elastic, but it's not elastic enough for a Democrat to win it safe. Now, for DeSantis, he'd have his safe states. Montana is on the fence, but I just don't see Brown getting the Native American turnout that he could get. So for that reason, I'm not going to have it as safe or as likely. Missouri is on the fence, but I think actually DeSantis isn't as good as Trump with the working class. He's almost as good, but he's not as good. Mississippi borderline likely, but I'll put it as safe. And then Indiana, safe. Actually, you know what? I'll put it as likely. I'll put these states as likely, even though they're all obviously Pence states, but these states are all very solid for. Or did I say Pence states? They're all very solid for Ron DeSantis, but Kansas, the suburbs would be, Brown would do better in the rural part of the state than Biden and Clinton, and he would continue to improve on Biden's suburban numbers. Maybe not do it as well. Like, I think Brown is a mediocre candidate for the suburbs, but everywhere else he's fantastic. So I guess the suburbs might not swing as hard to the left as you'd expect with Brown. But either way, Kansas would probably be a 10-point DeSantis state. He'd win Missouri and Indiana by 11 or 12, though. But to not, as I like to say early on in these predictions, I don't like to ruffle too many feathers. So if you're bothered by me having Missouri and Indiana as likely, whatever, I'm just having it there to be cautious. But without a doubt, DeSantis would win these states very easily. Now, for Brown, his likely states, he would probably win the entire Rust Belt. Oh, and I forgot Illinois safety, but he'd probably win the entire Rust Belt by likely margins, and that is pretty telling because he's from Ohio, which is part of the Rust Belt, or at least according to most, it's part of the Rust Belt, but Ohio is a working class state, and I think he could do very well with, the Iron Range voters in northern Minnesota. He could do very well with the working class in western Wisconsin. He could do very well with the working class in southeast Michigan. And, Macomb County is a good example of a working class county in Michigan that usually votes for the winner. This was a Bush County twice. It was an Obama County twice. And then Donald Trump comes in and wins it by like 10 over Hillary Clinton, and then he won it by 7 over Biden. So, it's a Republic. It's usually more conservative than the national average, but I think Brown could do better in places like Macomb because he has appeal to even socially conservative working class voters. So for that reason, I think he would end up carrying all these states by likely margins. Plus, he just run it up with black voters in the big cities like Philadelphia or Milwaukee or Detroit or Minneapolis, and he could just continue to improve on the Democrats' numbers in the suburbs. So for that reason, I'm going to put it as likely. Maine first district is safe. The second district is likely. We're not going to characterize the third, the second district yet. The first is likely. The first is safe. At large is likely. I'm getting kind of tripped up here, but likely Maine. I think we all know why. Maine is likely. It's just a state the Democrats do very well in, but don't quite win it by upwards of 12. The second district of Nebraska was a district that Biden won by 7. I think Brown could do better. He could potentially do better with inner city Omaha voters. and do better with the working class, because there were a lot of more moderate working class voters who voted for Trump because of the riots that were associated with Black Lives Matter. So and I think Brown will do a better job than Biden did with deflecting those attacks that came from Trump, that they're not the party of law and order. And then lastly, New Hampshire, getting Brown really close. He's at 268, so all he has to do is win literally one more state that I haven't characterized yet. So Brown 268 electoral votes, he'd win New Hampshire likely, in my opinion. It's just a state that's Democratic leaning, but doesn't really fall in the safe category. But it's definitely a state where he'd be favored. Now, taking a look at the likely DeSantis states, he'd probably win Alaska by a likely margin. But Alaska could be one of those shockingly close states where it's like only a 4 or 5 point margin of victory for DeSantis if the third party libertarians come out for Brown. But I don't see that happening right now, so I'm gonna have it as likely are. South Carolina likely, unless Brown gets insane black turnout, which I don't think he could do. He'd get good black turnout, but he wouldn't get insane black turnout, so I think that's going to be likely. And yeah, I think that's it for our likely DeSantis states. Now, Sherrod Brown's going to win the election right here because we're going to give him Nevada. Nevada, a lean D state. He'll run it up in Clark. He'll do better than Biden did in Clark County with Hispanics and working class voters. Probably do about the same in Washoe and better in the rural. So he could even win it by 5. I was debating putting it on likely, but I wanted to keep you watching this video for longer, and I thought some of you might just click off if I gave Nevada to Brown by a likely mark and giving him the victory way earlier. But now he's officially the winner. I'm going to hand him Arizona as well. Now, if Biden were to run again, I think against DeSantis, I think he'd lose Arizona. Against any other Republican, he'd probably win it, but I think he'd lose Arizona against DeSantis because he'd do worse than he did in 2020 with McCain Republicans, suburbanites, just generally speaking, against DeSantis. But Brown, he doesn't have that problem because he might do worse with suburbanites than McCain Romney Republicans that went for Biden in 2020 as a result of not liking Trump. But he can do better with Native Americans. He can do better with Hispanics. Just better with rural Trump voters because Brown has appealed to these voters. Biden, to be quite frank, does not. So for that reason, I'll have these states both at lean D. And then we have Ohio as lean D as well. This is Sherrod Brown's home state. It's debatably tilt, but I was thinking about this, and I'm going to put in the lean Democratic column. He won here by 7 when he won for re-election 2018. That was a Democratic wave year, I understand, but he's so popular there. He has tremendous appeal to the working class. He can run it up in Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, Toledo, all these larger cities in Ohio, and it's just a state that really elastic, and unless DeSantis can combat that with getting the white working class support that Trump received, I don't see him winning Ohio, and I think Brown, I'll be brave here and I'll give it to Brown by a lean margin, and he'll also win Georgia by a lean margin as well. Even with the new GOP voting bill, should be pretty strong for Brown. He'd probably win it by 2 or 3, especially in the Atlanta area, and the rurals up north. These voters that didn't come out for the Republicans in the runoffs are probably going to not come out for DeSantis. A concern like Sherrod Brown, they could even vote. Some of them could even vote for Brown because he has appeal to these rural voters. He has the ability to connect with them, which Joe Biden did not have. So yeah, now for DeSantis, he has a few lean states. I think Texas is a big one, but that I was kind of debating putting in tilt, but I'll put it in lean because I think this is kind of like Ohio, in that Ohio is a state, or Texas is a state where the Democrats have a clear path to victory. They have to do better in the Rio Grande Valley area. They have to do better in the Dallas suburbs, and they have to run it up in Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. And they were able to do the majority of those things, except Biden had a disastrous performance in the Rio Grande Valley, which is what gave the state to Donald Trump. But and I think Brown could really do better than Biden with Hispanics, especially if Biden is, especially if this is the 2024 matchup we're talking about. So I think that he could really make inroads on Biden's numbers in the Rio Grande Valley, but that would still result in like a 2-point Brown loss. Plus, I don't think he'd do as well with the rural or with the suburban vote. Obviously he'd probably do better than Biden did in 2020, but the suburbs are swinging to the left, and I think Biden is a better candidate for the suburbs than Brown. I could be wrong, of course. I originally thought, like 2 years ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said that Biden was a pretty bad candidate for the suburbs as well, or mediocre like Brown. It could really be tilt, but right now put it in the lean column. Florida, DeSantis' home state. This is a lean Republican state. It's probably going to stay that way unless Brown seriously campaigns there. But I think he'd let DeSantis have Florida. This is not a must-win for Democrats. I think he'd focus his campaign on just holding the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt. or at least the regions that Biden won. So our tilt states, or I think the main segment should lean Republican. So our tilt states, I think that North Carolina does go for Sherrod Brown, but I'll give Iowa to Ron DeSantis. I was really having a hard time with this one, but I just think Iowa, the rural voters there have shifted so far to the right that Brown would definitely make inroads with them, but I don't see him doing enough to win the state over DeSantis. Now, of course, I could be wrong. This is probably the closest state, but Iowa for right now probably goes to Ron DeSantis. North Carolina, though, the suburbs, which are which are really pushing the state to the left in the black vote, would be huge for Sherrod Brown. I think DeSantis, rural North Carolina is not as red as like rural Tennessee or these rural parts, other states of the South. And I think that Brown would capitalize off that and potentially even win some of these more rural counties that Biden lost by like 10 to 15%. So for that reason, I think Brown would be able to win North Carolina by a lean, if not tilt margin. I'm not wavering in confidence for my North Carolina prediction. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe if you don't already, and I'll see you all next one. Goodbye.